Welcome to Rooted and Rising Healing. I'm your host, Hali, and this space is for women rebuilding after betrayal. Here we make sense of what happened, find truth again, and reconnect with who you really are beyond the pain. Whether you're staying, leaving, or still in the middle, your story matters. Together, we'll explore truth, clarity, and the quiet courage it takes to rise from the wreckage of what was into the wholeness of who you're becoming. You're safe to be here. In the messy middle, in the rebuilding, and in the rising. Let's begin. Welcome to today's episode of the Rooted and Rising podcast. I am your host, Hali, and I appreciate you being here with me. Today's episode is a follow-up to last week's episode. As soon as I hit end on the recording, I started thinking about some other things related to triggers that I wanted to talk about. And so last week we talked a lot about how triggers show up in our body and how our triggers are signals and cues and messengers for us, and that we need to decipher those. And as I got thinking about it, sometimes it's hard to decipher what is an activation from an old pain and what is an intuitive alarm from something that is currently unsafe. And so I wanted to talk a little bit more about that and kind of break that down a little bit so that you can start to rebuild that trust within your own body. So our body doesn't lie, but it can speak sometimes in code. So we know that trauma stores sensory and emotional memories in the cells of our body that activate when something feels similar to a past danger. So maybe consider what sensations usually show up in your body when you feel unsafe, and where do you feel it? So our hypervigilance comes from that trauma, and our accurate alarm system still works as well. So there's two types of activation and the ways that our body communicates. So we're going to slow this down for a minute. And when you feel that rush of anxiety or that tightening in your chest or that sinking feeling in your stomach, you might either be tempted to think, I'm just triggered again. Or you might go to the other swing of the pendulum where we go to automatically there's danger in our environment. And so how do we tell the difference between the two? So sometimes the activation isn't just a flashback to the past. Sometimes it's your body whispering to you that there's something that's not right now. And so we're going to think about the old pain as your body remembering danger, but sometimes you might actually currently be in a safe environment. So it's kind of like an emotional bruise that's really still tender when something brushes up against it or gets near it. And so some things like that might be like maybe your partner sighs or checks their phone and your body might tighten because maybe in the past that was connected to acting out. Or maybe they come home later than expected and you feel this wave of panic, even though right now their story checks out. Your body's remembering those late nights of secrecy and the waiting and the dread. And so it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong right now, but it means that your nervous system hasn't yet learned what is different in this moment. So if you can ground and orient to the present, breathe, and the intensity starts to fade, then that's a sign that your body was likely reacting to an old pain. Now let's talk about the difference between a current threat. So this kind of activation feels a little bit different. The more you pay attention to it, the stronger it gets. Now let's talk about a current threat. This type of activation can feel a little different. The more you pay attention to this activation, the stronger that it gets. So for example, the more you pay attention to it, you might notice that your partner's words aren't matching up to their tone, or their explanations don't line up, or you might sense defensiveness or manipulation when you express your pain. So your gut whispers that something just doesn't feel right. And this isn't paranoia. This is actually your body detecting incongruence in the safety. So they might be saying one thing, but doing something else. So I want to give you some examples in a couple of different areas of different types of safety so that you can start to try and get to know exactly how your body speaks to you. And it might be different for everybody. So this might relate to you and maybe it doesn't, but I'm going to give you some examples so that you can start to get familiar with the language of your body. Okay, so I want to give you some examples in the area of emotional safety of some activations that might be related to old triggers. So if your partner sighs heavily and your stomach drops, it might remind you of a tone that they used before disclosure, before when you were having arguments, but maybe they haven't been doing that lately. If they check out emotionally during a hard conversation and you panic, your body might be remembering being stonewalled in the past. If you see a familiar look of irritation on their face and you feel instantly unsafe, even though they're not angry in this moment, it might be reminding you of an old threat of the past. So in this area of emotional safety, as far as like current threats or warnings, if you express a feeling and your partner rolls their eyes or mocks you, your body tenses because that is emotionally unsafe. If you notice they change the subject or minimize your pain when you bring up that topic of accountability, that's avoidance in real time. That's not just a flashback. If they're saying or telling you that you're overreacting when you try to express discomfort, that's gaslighting, not your trauma talking. In the area of psychological safety, some triggers related to old pain might be that you find yourself rehearsing conversations in your head to make sure that you get it right, so that hopefully if you say it in just the right way, they'll understand it and maybe they'll respond differently. But maybe your partner's actually been more patient lately, but you still find yourself trying to get it right. That might be related to an old pain or an old trigger. If you read into a neutral text message because it feels like when they used to lie, that might be an old pain. If you feel anxious when they're on their phone, even though they've been rebuilding transparency and they share access now, that might be an old pain. Current threats or current warnings around psychological safety is that you might notice that they start guarding their phone again or taking it into the bathroom, and your gut is tightening for a reason. Or their explanation about schedules or finances aren't really lining up, and when you ask about it, they get angry or defensive. That's a current threat. If they twist your words or make you question what actually happened, that's classic manipulation behavior, maybe Darvo or blame shifting, not a trauma echo, but something current. In the areas of physical safety, if you flinch when they raise their voice, even though they aren't yelling at you, that might be a trigger from an old pain. If your heart races when you hear a door slam because it used to precede escalation, that might be a trigger from an old pain. If you freeze when someone stands too close to you, your body might be remembering invasion of personal space. So current threats or warnings might be if they're using an intimidating posture, or they block a doorway, or they slam something near you, that's a current warning or current threat. If you feel pressure to have sex or engage physically when you've already said no, that's a current threat. If your body goes into fight or flight because something in their tone or their stance or their energy really feels unsafe in that moment, then that's current. Let's talk about some financial safety triggers. So if in the past there's been some financial discrepancies or misrepresentation or financial betrayal, then you might feel uneasy today when they make a purchase, even if you agreed to it. This could be a leftover fear from hidden spending. Or maybe even seeing a bank notification might spike your anxiety, even though there's transparency now. Current threats around financial security and safety is that when you become aware of new financial secrecy, so like accounts you can't access, unexplained withdrawals, or dismissive responses when you ask, that's a current threat. If they make big financial decisions without you, despite agreements that you've already had to rebuild trust around making those decisions together, that is current. If you have a spiritual practice in your relationship, there can be spiritual and relational safety related to those things. Some triggers that might be related to old pain is that if they share like a scripture or something that used to be used to weaponize during manipulation and your body braces, but they haven't been doing that lately, or they've had a change of heart, that could be related to an old pain. If you feel guarded during prayer together because faith was used to justify or excuse harm in the past, that might be an old pain. And current threats and warnings around this area is that if they use spiritual language to silence or to guilt you, things like, if you really forgave me, you wouldn't bring this up again, that's current. If they attend church or recovery meetings for appearances to check the box, but they're showing no humility or empathy at home, your intuition is probably sensing some incongruence there. If they talk about moving on while minimizing the need for continued repair, that's not actual safe spiritual alignment. So let's talk about some intuitive cues that you can pay attention to. So when you feel activation, you might want to pause and say, okay, does this feeling lessen when I get grounded into myself and orient to this present moment? We talked about that last week in the episode before this one. If you can get grounded when you bring yourself back into your body and into this present moment, then it's likely a trigger. But if the unease grows stronger, the more that you get present in this moment and the more you notice what's actually happening, that's likely a warning. So when you notice this activation, try this practice. So give yourself a pause. We got to create the space between the stimulus and the response. Remember my quote from Viktor Frankl from a couple of episodes. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies your power to choose. So we got to pause. We got to breathe. We got to ask our body what message it's trying to give us. What are you trying to protect me from right now? If you ground in yourself and you look around the room and you get present in this moment and you realize that you're safe, it's likely an echo of old pain needing comfort and reassurance and validation. If you ground and the discomfort intensifies as you tune into your current reality in this present moment and what's actually happening that you can see with your eyes, that's probably your body saying, pay attention. There's something here that isn't aligning with truth and that isn't aligning with safety. Neither one of these mean that you're crazy. Both are forms of communication from your body that loves you enough to try to protect you. And so learning to decipher and to get to know the language of your body, you can see how important this is for learning to trust yourself. And so the goal isn't to silence your body. It's to learn its language, because healing after this betrayal is confusing, and it's about learning to trust yourself again before you can ever trust your partner. So sometimes we want to give all that power to our partner and that we've got to be able to trust them again. And while that's true for relational repair and for relational safety, really we got to learn to trust ourselves first. Trusting ourselves comes before we're able to trust them. And practicing this, learning the language of your body, is a great way to start developing that skill of self-trust. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference, because when there has been, or when there is, especially when there has been gaslighting and darbo and manipulation and blame shifting in the past, it can be confusing to know what the difference is. And so that can blur those internal cues. Betrayal trauma often teaches us to doubt our reality, especially when the betrayer is insisting that you're just triggered or that they're trying to manipulate you or downplay your emotions. So it's easy to lose trust in our own intuition because it's repeatedly being invalidated. This is why sometimes the space in the relationship, so that you can get clear on what is real and what you can trust and what your body's telling you, is so valuable. So the work is not to stop being triggered. It's to learn to interpret what your triggers are actually trying to tell you, so that we can decipher between old pain and current danger. So just as kind of a recap, let me give you this practical discernment steps again. So the first step is to pause before reacting. Ground into your breath, ground into your body, put your hand on your heart. Activate your 5 senses and orient to this room. Take some deep breaths. The next step is to ask your body, what is it you're trying to protect me from right now? Listen to your body. Then do a reality check. Is there new evidence of harm, or is this a familiar emotional echo from the past? What am I seeing with my eyes? Not what's the story that's being created in my head, and not even what is the words that's coming out of their mouth. What are the actions that we're seeing? What is the evidence of what we're seeing in our reality right now? And then track consistency. Does this pattern repeat with certain behaviors, with certain places, or with certain tones? And then look for congruence. Do the words and the actions align? Inconsistency is really a key safety red flag. Safety and trust is rebuilt with consistent, trust-building, safety-creating behaviors over an extended period of time. And so look for that congruency. Is it there or is it not? And then use safe others. Sometimes talking through what you're seeing with a coach or a therapist or a safe, trusted friend who understands betrayal trauma, not with the person that you're unsure is safe, but with someone that is safe, somebody outside of that, can help you get clear on your reality. They can help you see through some of your blind spots, or they can help you identify manipulative behaviors if it's hard for you to identify those on your own. So we want to relearn to trust in our own system. Healing requires reestablishing that safe trust first before we can ever trust someone else. And so some of those practices can be journaling and body sensations, mapping your activation patterns, grounding before confronting, naming your body's yes and your body's no. And remember what a couple episodes I talked about fierce self-compassion? This is a good place for that. I no longer shame myself for being triggered, but I thank my body for trying to keep me safe. So as we come to the close of this episode, I think about what's one area of safety that you've begun to reclaim or that you want to begin to reclaim? Is it in the physical area, the emotional, or the spiritual? And then I would invite you this week to just slow down, listen to your body, and remember that your activation isn't weakness, it's communication, and it's trying to tell you something really important. So I hope this is helpful for you as an additional episode on understanding our triggers and getting to know the language of our body and really tapping into our own inner intuition and our own knowing as we work to rebuild safety and trust within ourselves before we can ever even consider leaning back into safety and trust in a relationship if that's what we're choosing to do. So I hope this is helpful. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you'll come back again next week and check the show notes for some resources and other ways to connect with me. And I will see you next week. Have a good one. Thank you for being here with me inside Rooted and Rising Healing. Remember, healing isn't a destination. It's a returning to your truth, to your voice, to the woman you were always meant to be. You have the power to rise at your own pace, in your own way. And when it feels hard, just come back to your breath and remind yourself, still I rise. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love if you shared it with another sister on the journey. And until next time, stay rooted, stay rising. You've got this.